Good evening and welcome to The Right Side, the show where we talk about today's news, views, trends, and opinions from an admittedly conservative perspective. I'm your host, Chris Pareja, and this evening we're joined by Dana Allen. He's the CEO of American Uncensored News, as well as the producer of an upcoming documentary called Who Wins When America Loses? Dana, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm a fan of yours. I've watched a lot of your programs.
Thank you for being the one. We appreciate that. But you're in media yourself,
yes.
And you're producing things, you've got the network, you're doing some expansion in media, but how did you get involved in all of this?
You know, it's when I found out that the news media was censored. This would be back about 1995, and there's certain stories that were blatantly being covered up. And I guess I knew even before that, Reed Irvine, who founded Accuracy in Media, told me that I was one of the first members they ever had when they started in 1968, and I was like 14 years old. So I saw since a young age that the news media was actually an enemy of what's good for America, and I wanted to get involved to try to solve it.
So what was one of those first stories that really raised your attention as a young man trying to figure out the world?
Probably one was Jim Jones and the mass murder down in Jonestown, and I knew two people that died there. And the congressman that was shot was my neighbor, Leo Ryan, and he was probably the most admired person, Jim Jones was, in the Democratic Party at that time. First Lady Rosalind Carter came to his church. George Moscone, the mayor of San Francisco. Jerry Brown was a part of his cult in a way. He attended services at People's Temple, and Willie Brown said he's, fantastic. He's a cross between Albert Einstein and Chairman Mao. Well, Chairman Mao was a mass murdering communist dictator.
Well, there's the tie.
That's right, because they were both mass murderers, and Jim Jones was a card-carrying member of the Communist Party USA. So he's an atheist. And so I knew that, and I actually thought that Leo Ryan wasn't coming back from Jonestown because I thought he'd be killed. And then when it broke, I thought, well, finally, these people will pay a price, people like Jerry Brown for supporting him. And nothing. They just pretended that Jim Jones had nothing to do with the Democratic Party when he was arguably maybe the most admired person in the Democratic Party at that time.
Wow. So covering up, and now you're saying Democrats are involved in covering things up. I think there's more depth to this that'll be coming.
Oh, yeah, yes.
So other stories that you were also noticing cover-ups?
Yeah, I was involved with the Paula Jones thing. So I was living here in the Bay Area at the time, and I found out that she'd come forward and no one would cover it. And so the New York Times came to the press conference that AIM did with her saying what went on, and at the end of it, Don Irvine, that runs AIM now, asked the New York Times reporter, "You are going to report this, aren't you?" He says, "No." He says, "Why?" He says, "I don't want to." And so I felt sorry for her, and I actually arranged for an attorney here in the Bay Area who'd been part of the Clinton-Gore campaign, their minority outreach chairman, but he's a specialist in sexual harassment lawsuits, to represent her. Then later, they got someone back in Washington, D.C. that they thought was better because it was going to be tried back there. But I told people in my church and my Bible study about this. So then 4 months later, after I told them all the details of Paula Jones, including her name, it had never been reported. Then when she filed the lawsuit, it was reported. So later, someone in this Bible study I was in, I was telling them, the news is censored. Oh, that can't be. Someone else says, he told us all the details about Paula Jones 4 months before her name was ever mentioned once. How could that be? And this guy didn't have an answer, and so this is what I call inoculation. And I think it's something that we, people like ourselves, want to do, is if we inoculate someone by showing the truth about how the news media is censored in one story, then they'll never really trust it on others.
Right.
So I was inoculated to an extent by seeing these stories being covered up, and then I guess sort of my mission is to inoculate other people.
Well, and there's so many people that do the inoculation, as you're calling it, on an individual basis,
yes.
But you've taken it a completely different direction.
Yes.
You're wrangling media resources, you're producing movies to exploit this kind of thing. What takes someone from individual evangelism for the cause to actually expanding it out and wanting to do it on a broad base Especially because it's not inexpensive to do these things in media.
It's risky. And then you'll become very unpopular if you're uncovering stories that other people want to censor.
Unpopular to a point of assassination attempts if you do a good job.
That happens.
It does.
Yep.
Andrew Breitbart just saying, so continue on.
Yeah.
Right?
So one of the things is complaining, in this accuracy media, I'm still a supporter of them, MRC, complaining about the media really doesn't do much good. Right. The reason is they know what they're doing. They're up to evil. They know it. They have an agenda. They want to bring about a certain type of political system here, and they don't care if people complain. So what the solution is we have to become the media. How much did it cost Ted Turner to create CNN? Less than nothing. He made over $1 billion by creating CNN. Why aren't we doing that? And it's been done to a small extent. Fox Television, and it's the most profitable part of their whole enterprise. So why wasn't that done in the 1980s? There's no reason why it shouldn't have been done back in the 1980s. So, and that's the thing. Now, talk radio is an exception. Talk radio I consider to be uncensored. I consider this show to be uncensored, a real rarity on television. But in most of the media, newspapers, magazines, television, Hollywood, there's a general censorship and fabrication going on, and the only solution is we have to become the media and own it. So I'm trying to do my part. I tried to help other people. When Paul Weyrich started the NAT television network, I invested in it. So that's, I have other interests, but I see this huge problem for America, so that's why I've gotten involved.
Okay, and so talk about the documentary a little bit.
Sure.
What's it about? What can people expect from it?
It started with the title. So, I think you should always, in business, you have to figure out, what's in the best interest of your employees, try to align your interests with your employees. So there's a lot of bad things happening in America. So who gains from bad things? And so we just started with the title, Who Wins When America Loses? And it was shocking what we found. About a year went into this documentary, and we found out that there's one entity, you may call it, that wins almost every time that America loses. So Detroit, has been destroyed. It's hurt everybody except for the evil entity. Let's say, racism, racist lynchings in the past were almost always done by people associated with the same evil entity. Almost all crime in the United States, I've talked to many prison guards and policemen, they say 90% of criminals associate themselves with the same evil entity. And history was worse than I thought on this. So I'll spill the beans.
So
don't spill the beans.
This has got to be an international espionage kind of story, right? This is somebody in a communist country somewhere far away, right?
That's right. And not only that, this entity has killed more U.S. soldiers than the Nazis did in World War II or the Japanese did.
Okay, so I'm smelling beans. Are you going to spill them now?
Well, who's the only people that killed more soldiers? It's a Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party in 1960 was out of power in Detroit, and at that time they did not have the mayorship. It was the highest median wages in the world. It's workers' paradise. And they did not have control. They got control, and a Democratic death spiral started where things got worse. And because they got worse, people voted more Democrat. And then when they got more control, things got worse, and then it's a Democratic death spiral. And so today, how many people do you think vote Democrat in Detroit after they've totally failed?
Probably most of them, still.
98%. Right. 98%. It's the most Democratic voting city in the United States. I think Flint, Michigan's number 2. The least Democratic voting city in the United States is Provo, Utah. It's not an accident. Provo, Utah has the best job market in the United States. It gets rated number 1 or number 2 for job growth. So when Americans win, that's terrible for the Democratic Party. When cities are destroyed, jobs are destroyed, neighborhoods, families, and people's lives, there is nothing better. Nothing is more beneficial to the Democratic Party than destroying a city.
So explain. I mean, there are people that I can sense hackles being up all over the place.
Yeah.
What would cause people to continue that trend of voting for their own destruction? If what you're saying is true, that's basically what's happening. What would cause people to do that?
One thing, if they're not being told that, if they're not being interviewed on the street by television crews saying, why are you voting this way when everything's gotten worse, when they've gotten control? And if you look, at the opposite, what happens when the other side gets elected. In Provo, Utah, only 12% of the people vote Democrat, and it has a murder rate of 1. Detroit, 98% of the people vote Democrat, and has a murder rate of 40 times higher murder rate. I mean, that's endangering everyone's life. In fact, for young people in the United States, if they live in a high Democratic area, their number one cause of death is not suicide, it's not disease, it's not car accidents, it's being murdered. So if that was, people were asked on the street in interviews about that, it would change it. So part of it is news censorship. This is not even, and the Republican Party should be asking this. And this is not to promote the Republican Party.
Because they have their own issues.
That's right. Libertarians, whoever, outside the Communist Party, it's just about any political party doesn't have the same problem where they win when America loses. But with the Democrats, nothing benefits them more.
Yeah, it's a steep claim to make, but you're justifying it historically.
Yes.
And so is that where the documentary goes? Does it outline all of the different?
That's correct. And the past history, in a way, is even worse than the current history. I was not aware of this. We actually got a little bit depressed when we found out about such horrific crimes that took place in the past in America. And the theme was always the same. The Democratic Party is behind it. So human slavery was their signature issue. There's nothing that the Democratic Party believed more in, that black people should be slaves of white people and never work. In fact, in the moderate Democrat in the 1860 election, Stephen Douglas said that white people had a sacred right to decide whether they wanted to enslave black people or not. The Democratic Party never wanted slavery to go away. They wanted it to go on forever. And they reinstituted it after the Civil War when they lost their war against the United States. And they had slavery going on into the 1930s. There's some states in this country, like 80% voting Democratic states, where the majority of their budget came from selling people in slavery. What they do is they arrest someone for loitering or whatever, give them a 1 or 2 year prison sentence. They didn't have prisons. What they do is they'd sell them to a farmer. That's where the chain gangs came from and so forth. So the mines, farms, or whatever. I've seen pictures where you have like 50 small children between the age of 14 and 8 out working a field with striped prison uniforms with chains on, and that's where the money was coming to run this. And I wasn't aware of this. It's called the second slavery, or slavery by another name. And so slavery went on into the 1930s until the federal government finally put an end to the second form of slavery. And there's really no good Democratic history. I tried to find some. I said, well, Harry Truman, he's a wholesome guy and so forth. So I looked into Harry Truman, and I found out on his presidential library website that he's a member of the Pendergast gang. Well, who's that? Well, the official name was the Jackson County Democratic Club. It's a mass murdering gangster outfit. The head of it was called Pendergast, and in 1934, the Associated Press said that Tom Pendergast's Democratic machine won a resounding victory marked by 4 killings, numerous beatings, and massive voter fraud. And that's how Truman got into the Senate and became president, was he sold out to a mass murdering crime gang. I did not know that until we...
Yeah, that's a pretty wicked history.
It is.
So what do we do about these kinds of things? You talk about people becoming the media. You talk about these things that you've discovered, which we're saying things get censored. Well, that doesn't show up on most people's radar. History has been either rewritten or whiteout's been used or whatever it happens to be. How do these things get made right? How do these things get exposed? Is it by people like yourself taking a specific interest and then having the guts to go out there and take the darts? What is it?
That's one way. And then if you consider all the money that's been spent on political campaigns, and I know you're actually a politician yourself, which is good.
I'm recovering.
You're recovering. I've heard that term before. We have the money. It's Republicans probably have about as much money as Democrats. Why do we let them totally own Hollywood? Why do we let them totally own television? And when that was broken with Fox, what did it do? They got the highest ratings. And in talk radio, it is competitive. And who won? Conservatives won. The liberals, communists, or whatever, lost on talk radio. It's overwhelmingly. So why don't we do that everywhere? We need to. We absolutely need to for the country. California is a special case. I'm, from a pioneer family. My great-grandfather was one of the founders of Palmdale. My grandfather had an orchard here in Silicon Valley before it was called Silicon Valley, in Los Gatos. And California's a great state, but it's become a captive to the Democratic Party, and in many economic factors, it's starting to go into death spirals. Not in the Detroit one, but we have some special advantages. And remember, Detroit was the most prosperous city in the United States for the average working person. Much more prosperous than New York City.
Well, California has been a prosperous state.
Oh, absolutely.
It's
absolutely.
slipping in a lot of ways as well.
It absolutely is. The Central Valley has not done well at all. So high tech, we have this sort of hub, and it's sort of self-perpetuating, but people are leaving, So I think California needs to turn itself around before we kill the goose that lays the golden egg.
Right. Well, farmers need crazy stuff like water.
Yes, yeah.
And when you take that away from them, it tends to hurt.
And who wins from that? So let's say all the farm workers lose their jobs and they're on welfare. Well, people on welfare tend to vote Democrat. So if you destroy, you see, it's not like, are they really stupid enough not to know the difference between Detroit and Provo, that when they destroy a city and destroy jobs, it benefits them incredibly well? But when people have jobs, it's political hell for them. They're not that stupid. They have to know that. I'm talking about the Democratic elites.
Well, unless the media tells them that it's the evil Republicans or the evil conservatives that are keeping them down and destroying their jobs because they're leaving the state because it's too expensive to do business here, so they're greedy, so that's why they're leaving, because they don't care about the little guy versus watching the regulations, smashing those people and forcing them out in the first place. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
Yeah, and Chris, let's say that this show that's going on right now, let's say that was a typical show in California. I mean, it would ruin these people doing these destructive economic things. But we're the exception to the rule, unfortunately, at this point.
Right. So, I mean, what's next on your agenda? How are you going to continue to get this message out?
Well, I do have these television stations. It's like Channel 3 in San Francisco, 45 here, Channel 11 up in Chico, Channel 28 off Sutter Buttes, Sacramento area, etc. So I'd like to get that rolling, and we're starting off very humble. I'm running a fair amount of infomercials and so forth, but that's one thing. And it's also get other people to do the same thing. I've tried to encourage the Koch brothers to go out and buy media. And so let's say if there's 5 other people that were providing uncensored news and doing such a good job, they ran me out of business, I'd be fantastic. I'd want that to happen.
Right.
We need this to happen. When I started to help start Newsmax, I was founding chairman of Newsmax. I didn't do it. I gave the idea to someone else, Chris Pareja. Then when I finally talked him into doing it, he asked me if I'd be the chairman and co-found it with him. I said, sure. Right. But I didn't do it for money. I gave the idea away because this problem needs to be solved.
So let's say there's some budding producer that does documentaries or something like that that's out there, or there are other people who have the bravery or stupidity to go out and speak their mind and find other people who do as well. Are you looking for them to reach out and possibly share their content with you?
Absolutely, yes. Okay. And I'm very open to collaborations, and I'd like to see that happen. Another thing is this ownership issue. Not only can we start things, but why not buy the existing meeting? You may have heard there was if
there's already an infrastructure, why not?
Exactly. You may have heard there was a plan by conservatives to take over CBS News. I was the person that started that. So I worked with Reader, Vine, Accuracy and Media, and we started that. Then I tried to take over Gray Television, and they actually have 35 stations. It's a big company. And how much money did that cost me? It didn't cost me anything because the stock literally went up over 100 times. I got out after it went up 60 times. But you see, this is the thing. We can contribute money to charities or whatever, and it's gone forever. Why not invest money in uncensored news?
Right.
And then you have something that can live forever and live, I don't know what the word, it's self-perpetuating. It's not something that extinguishes itself.
Yeah, and if we get enough people to do that, critical mass occurs, and maybe, just possibly, people have a different perspective and could learn to defend themselves in the voting booth, as an example?
Absolutely. In a lot of things, if it wasn't for news censorship, our country would be radically different. Like, for instance,
let's talk about that. How would it be different?
Let's say the Clintons, they would both be in jail. Their name was, Sally Smith and Bill Thompson. They'd both be in prison now if it wasn't for the fact the news media wants to keep them in office because they've committed a lot of crimes. And tonight at the event at the Conservative Forum, I'm going to talk about that. And so all the witnesses, let's say in the Vince Foster case, and Vince Foster was the law partner of Hillary Clinton, and he followed her to Washington D.C. when they went in the White House. Every witness says that the evidence indicated that he'd been murdered, and the FBI tried to get them to falsify the testimony, and when they refused to, they defied the testimony. They said that the witness, and I have tapes of many of these people. In fact, I even have a tape of the head of the investigation admitting this is true, that they falsified their testimony and that the evidence did indicate that Vince Foster was murdered. Well, who murdered him?
All of the deaths that happen around the Clintons are just accidents. People drop their weights on their necks. I mean, this happens regularly,
Isn't it funny that when they stopped being in the White House, all of a sudden all these deaths of associates of the president went away? There's I think 63 associated with them, and they went away. And I remember once Hillary Clinton said at a funeral, she says, "Oh, gee, so many friends of ours are dying." Well, maybe there's a correlation there.
Trend line somewhere.
There is. And this is a very serious matter, but Vince Foster, Ron Brown, who's the Commerce Secretary, his plane was purposely crashed into a mountain through radar vectoring. I'll have proof of that tonight in the show. So yeah, this is serious stuff.
Well, at the end, when you're on the way out and people think you've belched, that's why you say, "Pardon me." It actually is just that you've excused yourself of all crimes that might have happened, and now you're exempt from person.
That's right. So then let's say the death spiral in Detroit could not happen with news. And I have to give Fox Detroit, some of my material comes from them. I'm going to use that tonight.
Right.
They're doing a good job. But if the whole media was telling the truth about Detroit, it would have never happened. It would have been, like Provo or whatever, a city of Dallas.
Right. But
because it had all the advantages in the world, and then they threw it all away.
And so why would they just...
There's no reason for it. And people, I'm glad this is going out on the air, because I have people ask me this all the time. They go, why do people, and then another thing they say, why do black folks vote for the people that were the slavers, the Ku Klux Klanners, the racist lynchers, and the segregators? The greatest enemy of human rights in the history of the United States is the Democratic Party. That's like a Jewish person becoming a National Socialist, a Nazi. It makes no sense. And I think people need to be confronted about this. And who gets hurt the worst? It's the people in Detroit that live under the Democrats are the people who hurt the most. They're the people suffering these horrific crime rates.
Right. So if people want to track you and kind of keep tabs on what you're doing, who you're tormenting, what truth you're breaking, are there websites that they can go to?
There is. AUN-TV.com has it, and we have a lot of stories there. I don't update it all the time because I'm working on other things, with the television network, but that's sort of the central thing. And they can post comments, and we'll respond to it and so forth.
Okay. And so if they do want to take a look at what you're doing with the documentary and those kinds of things, is the documentary at the AUN-TV site?
There's a site under that, the term "Who Wins When America Loses Movie.com."
Okay.
So they can get there. If they just put it in the title, they can find it. And I'm doing a collaboration with someone that's been on your show, or I believe, or at least did the Conservative Forum, Trevor Loudon. Did he do your show?
Yep. He has been here.
And he's a friend of mine, and he has a documentary, "The Enemies Within," about how so many people in the Democratic Party are communist, and they're just using...
And he has a book about it as well.
He does. And Sharon Engels just produced a documentary about voter fraud called "Not on My Watch," and then we have "Who Wins When America Loses." We're putting the three of them together, and that will be available from Our Voice PAC, which was Sharon Engels' PAC before. She's running for office again, so that's been spun off.
Yeah, there's some separation that occurs.
But that would also be another site that people can get access to this
information. Well, we appreciate tremendously you joining us this evening, Dana. But if you'll hold on for just a moment, we'll be back after a word from our underwriters, the Conservative Forum.
Some people think that a meeting of conservatives in Silicon Valley could fit in a small room. In fact, when the Conservative Forum was founded in 2003, we did meet in a small room, a coffee shop in San Jose. It doesn't get more grassroots than this. It may surprise you that there are thousands of people right here in Silicon Valley who share your principles of liberty, free markets, and limited government. Since our humble beginnings in that coffee shop, we've outgrown 3 meeting halls. From San Jose to Gilroy to Mill Valley, we bring hundreds of people together each month from all over the Bay Area to promote the principles of American liberty. How do we do it? It starts with a stellar lineup of speakers. Speakers like Steve Forbes, Senator Jim DeMint, Dr. Victor Davis Hanson, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, Andrew Breitbart, Pamela Geller, and many others. These speakers passionately articulate our shared principles and remind us why conservatism isn't just the smart choice, it's also the moral choice. Our monthly meetings are only one dimension of the forum. We underwrite The Right Side, a monthly television show on cable access channel KMVT. We also host a monthly Constitution discussion group and provide tables at our meetings for more than a dozen local groups who share our love of liberty to promote their specific cause. The Conservative Forum is the premier place in Silicon Valley for conservatives to gather, become invigorated, motivated, and empowered. We welcome guests to our monthly meetings and offer special discounted pricing to first-time visitors. Take a look at our speaker lineup in the coming months and join us to learn why we say liberty is made in America.
And that was a word from our underwriters, the Conservative Forum. We appreciate them tremendously. They've made the show possible for the last 6 seasons, but what they're best known for is their speaker series, and that's why Dana was with us this evening. He'll be showing up there about half an hour from now in real time at the IFES Portuguese Hall at 432 Stearland Road in Mountain View. Around 7 o'clock, the doors open on a normal second Tuesday of the month, and there you'll see speakers, for example, like in December, Andrew Klavan. He's the author of such internationally best-selling crime novels as True Crime, which was filmed by Clint Eastwood, Don't Say a Word, and that was filmed starring Michael Douglas, and Empire of Lies. He's also known on PJTV. In January, Lance Azumi, a senior director of the Center for Education at the Pacific Research Institute, will be at the forum. And in February, Dr. Gary Wolfram, an economics professor at Hillsdale College, will be there. If you need more information, you can find that at theconservativeforum.com. And in wrapping tonight, we often talk on this show about the media and bias and those kinds of things, but when it moves from bias to outright lies, cover-ups, and other dishonesty or propaganda, using the P word, it becomes a bigger problem for those of us who are thinking that we're living our lives in a way that we have honest information and can make honest decisions. If you're only given part of the information, there's no way you can make a proper decision. And so I encourage you to check out Dana's work a little bit in more detail and find out if it makes sense, because some of the stuff that he talked about may be shocking if this is the first time you've heard it, but my sense is that you'll find out after seeing how much of it is true that you'll need to dig deeper on your own, and who knows, maybe you'll also take the reins and help make some of the news break that you know to be true out there in the world that others might be missing otherwise. So we appreciate you joining us on The Right Side this evening. I've been your host, Chris Pareja. I will continue to be that guy after I leave. But if you'd like to throw darts at me, ask questions, or get more information about the show, you can reach out to us at therightsidetv@gmail.com, and we'll try to get those things addressed for you. In the meantime, have a great evening, and we'll see you again either on the show or in person sometime soon. Thanks again.